than I think it does. And I'm just dancing like a goof for a little while, and I'm okay with that. So, welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Inner Tapestry Series. I know it's been a little bit, and that is because I was out on sabbatical, and Red was such a dear friend and really honored that I was taking a break. So, thank you for that, Red. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so we're back today. We're going to be talking all about animals today, animal magic, star-seeded animals, connecting with your animal companions, all kinds of good stuff. So, Red, if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Red MoonEagle. I am a psychic catalyst. I'm the healer's healer, and I'm a teacher. And one of my most favorite topics is also talking about animal companions and our entities that are in animal form. It can be a fascinating topic, and I'm so excited that Safrianna is excited to talk about it with me because I can barely hold myself together. I've been trying to stop myself talking. We've been talking prior to the call, and I'm like, oh, I should stop talking about that because we're going to talk about that later.
We
I
always
can
have so
barely
many
contain
good
myself.
things. Yes, like there's just so much good stuff to talk about. So, yes,
Mhm.
thank you. And just in case you don't know me, I'm Safrianna Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide, and I am here to help people step into the fullness of who they came here to be and shine their light. And I think it's so important that we talk about animals and their role in this because animal companions provide so much support that we don't acknowledge as a collective. I don't think nearly as enough, but yet we are so interdependent on our animal companions and the animals we don't quite treat like companions and just all of that. So I'm excited to get into this today. And yes, Red was like, oh, and then there was the, and I'm like, and then I'm like, well, we're going to talk about that today. And she was so cute. Like, oh, yes. So you had started to tell a couple stories, and we can kind of start there about animals that you have met with or you've known in your life. I love that Astra's little tail is going right now, by the way, that have been very clear to you. They are not pets. They are
Yeah.
more than that. So I'd love for you to speak to that.
You know, I think it started, I think that my real awareness of an animal companion that was very clear, like, do not call me a pet. I have a name, and you're going to call me by my name, and you're going to treat me like an entity that I am. You're not going to treat me like all the other humans have treated me or that you're emulating, right?
Mhm.
Like I was called out. And her name was Dulcie. And a little bit of a background story of Dulcie very quickly is that she was feral. I went looking for kittens because I had had a guide say, okay, there is an animal companion waiting for you, basically. And I interpreted that, oh, it's time for me to get a pet cat, a pet kitten. That's how I translated it. I was wrong. I was wrong. I was not only a little bit wrong, I was way wrong. And I spent a couple weeks looking at ads in the paper, like following all the kitten ads, and I went to house after house after house, and they would kind of roll over in my lap and stuff, but then they'd ignore me. Like they wouldn't have anything to do with me. I'm like, clearly y'all aren't interested. And this feral cat had given birth in this lady's house, and I went to look at her kittens, and the lady had gone back into her house and she'd come back out. And when she came back out, Dulcie was sitting in my lap. She'd introduced herself. She curled up in my lap. She was purring. She was like, I'm going to come home with you. And the woman comes out of her house and goes, that is a feral animal we have never been able to get near. And I went, oh, well, can I have her? And they were like, please? Because they couldn't have animals in their house, and they were completely flabbergasted. Like, what are we going to do with this animal that's had these kittens, and we have to get rid of them? That's where the ad came from. And when I got up to leave, she literally got up, walked to the car door, and sat down in front of the car door. I opened my car door, and she leaped into the car. Like, she's like, I'm going home with you. You are my person. But the journey of having Dulcie in my life was a combination of I knew exactly what her name was, like within hours of her joining my life. And she repeatedly let me know, like, I am not your pet. I am myself. And you will not treat me like a pet. You will treat me like the entity I am. And it's interesting. She really reinforced things that I'd kind of always known, but as she called me out on it, like, don't emulate the people that are broken. Don't emulate the people that don't recognize who we are as entities in your life. And she helped me reconnect at a time in my life where I needed to be reminded of my earth sense. I needed to be reminded of my innate connection to earth herself that I had spent many years kind of, well, I play with it a little bit off to the side, and I teach classes and I do ritual and I kind of do things with people, but I hadn't really like leaned into it since I had been younger. And uh, that reinforcement now over and over and over again with other people's animal companions and other messengers, the birds in the trees, the bumblebees that come visit, the little worms that crawl out and say hey sometimes, like all of the connectors that we have in our world. One of the biggest lessons from all animal companions is not only how much they help us, but they are literally trying so hard all of the time to help us understand that we're part of Mother Earth's ecosystem.
Yeah.
We spend so much time separating ourselves in our square boxes.
Oh, my brain is over here like, oh my gosh, and we need to talk about this and this and this, and there's so much here.
Yeah.
So first, her name was Dulcie. Am I saying that right?
Her name was Dulcie. Yeah.
Dulcie. Well, she sounds like she was the perfect companion to come into your life at that time and help you, really have these awarenesses. And then I love that she pulled in, the bees and the birds, because the thing that I've witnessed with animal companions, some are like they move in, right? They live with us and they hang out with us and they're there, right? And we have these very ongoing relationships. And then some animals literally show up for the briefest second, like a butterfly flying by or this little jumping spider that keeps coming and visiting me on the porch. And they're just,
Yep.
they're there. And when we are awake and aware enough to tune into them and listen, and, not all of us have the gift of animal speaking or the ability to like hear the message, but even to just symbolically connect with them a moment, because we do have collective symbolism, right?
We
Like
do.
butterflies representing change or spiders representing connections in the web or, like all of this. But we will absolutely bypass that if we're in the state of thinking we are superior to them.
Yes. We are not superior. Thank you for pointing that out. That's a big one. It's one of those things where I get that question a lot when I do readings and stuff, and I start talking about people's animal connectors, because there's our spiritual animal connectors. Those are those that Mother Earth, as we are part of her ecosystem, she sends us a blue heron, she sends us a worm, she sends us the jumping spider, like she sends us the messengers that we are already innately connected to if we just sit in that space, be uncomfortable, and recognize our commonality. But most of the time when people ask me questions about what does this animal mean, it is coming from a place of I am superior on the hierarchy scale. So the question usually seems, and I have to be very careful with it, because a lot of times that ego, right, that ego of hierarchy kicks in, and it's what does that message mean to support my hierarchy? And normally those messages aren't about supporting any kind of hierarchy. It's supporting connection in some way. And if you're not ready for that messaging, it can, I've had clients that are like, they're mad at me. They're mad because I won't reinforce their ego in that. Because Mother Earth doesn't care about your ego.
No.
The spider doesn't care about your ego.
No.
Your animal companion, feline or canine or bird or snake or whatever it is, they don't give a rat's ass about your ego. Ever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that our animal companions have the capacity to teach us, again, if we're willing to listen, whether we hear or not,
Right.
that ego really gets in the way of a lot of stuff, right? My dear friend Alicia Sweezer, who we actually did like an animal communication live recently, and I'm in a community with her for my birthday. She's a very, very powerful animal communicator. And we had a great conversation about sometimes when you get so close to an animal companion, just like a human companion, it can
Yes.
be harder to hear what they're trying to say to you because you're so
Yes.
enmeshed. And so she was like, by the way, Miss Baby, who's one of my feline companions, really wants you to like relax and like really, really relax and like pull this frantic energy down and just chill. And that's
Yeah.
like the beauty of so many of our companions, is that they can teach us what life can look like without ego. Because what gets
Yeah.
me out of my relaxing state is, oh God, I got to work. I've got to survive. I got to do this. I got to do that. Right. Our
Yeah.
animals show us like, oh, we get to live in communion with the earth and each other. And like it'll all
Hmm.
work out.
Yeah. It'll all work out. It'll all work out. And there's a quality of when they are teaching us. Not everybody has animal speak, as you said before. That is a true statement. I have met people who do not have animal speak, but they do have, and we all have, the ability to connect into the intrinsic pieces of our meat suit that connect us to Mother Earth. And thusly, we have the intrinsic ability to pay attention, to be mindful, to be present, to be in our bodies, to be in our spirit, to be emotionally available, energetically available to those animal companions, no matter who and where they are represented in our world. And it's a beautiful thing. And I find that if you can lean into that and recognize the entity, the innate intelligence of the entity that's with you, they can bring forward their multidimensional selves as well. And
Mm-hmm.
Dulcie was very much not a cat living in a cat body. I don't know how to say that any other way, but that was not a human stuck in a cat body. That was not a cat entity stuck in a cat body. That was something else. Don't ask me what. I never quite got that untangled, and that's okay. But I had her when I had my first son, Thor. And because she was feral and I was the only human she would allow feed her, I was the only human she would curl up in a lap with. I was the only human in her world that she would let near her. So when I brought Thor home from the hospital, my roommate at the time, she was like, oh, maybe you should introduce Dulcie to Thor, like really, maybe hyper vigilant. Because there is this fear that some people have about some animals with children, especially animal companions, right? So different breeds with animals with kids, or there's some superstitions from a lot of different places, right?
Sure.
And I brought Thor home from the hospital in his carrier, and Dulcie sniffed his foot, and he promptly kicked her in the nose, and she kind of went, "That's not what I expected." And I kind of kept an eye on her for a couple days because I wasn't sure. She was so possessive of me, but she kept telling me, and I didn't believe her. This is my fault, right? She was like, "Oh, I accept him because I know he's a part of you." Like she kept saying that, but I wasn't settled. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like trusting it. Nothing she had ever told me proved to be wrong, but I still struggled with it. And I woke up one night in the middle of the night, and he slept in the bed next to me when he was really, really tiny. And she was curled around both of us. And she had a really long body, and she was curled around us. And there were a couple times that I had him up on the changing table, and I turned my back, and I turned back, and she's like curled around him on the changing table. Like as soon as I turned my back, she was like curled around him, like, and he could pull on her hair. Babies do. They grab hold of it, yank, and she would just purr, and she had the loudest purr. Like, oh, I know he doesn't mean to hurt me. He's
Mm-hmm.
exploring his human body. So animal companions, when you give them the ability to feel safe in their environment, And when you acknowledge them for who they give back equitably.
Yeah.
It is a reciprocity of communication and care. And you
Mhm.
don't have to have the ability to understand their words, so to speak. They will communicate with you in a way that you can get it, but you have to be able to receive it. And I have been there. I've been where I didn't receive it. I
Yeah.
am definitely somebody who screwed it up a couple times.
And so have we all, right? Especially because we don't have a large understanding as a society right now about that interdependence and that, interconnected web of life. And we do, and I'm using the royal, not the royal we as me, the collective we here. Like,
Right.
we
Yeah.
don't see animals as an equal
No.
participant in this life. And that breaks my heart, and it's something that I'm very passionate about talking about. And it also, when we view ourselves in this hierarchical way, we're the ones mucking up mother nature, period. Like, animals are not out there polluting, animals are not out there, and let's
Nope.
acknowledge for a moment, we are animals, we are the animal that
We
is
are.
mucking it all
We
up.
are. Yes,
And
100%.
on top of that, something that you had brought up right before we went live was the genetic changes of animals. Because I was talking about one of my feline companions, unfortunately, has been not doing so well lately. And she's got one of those pushed in little noses, and she's got like little tiny ear canals. And so she's just miserable right now because she's got an infection. And so we were talking about the genetic changes. So I'd love to get into that a little bit, because we have, and this is not just like our domesticated pet animals that we buy from the breeder, right? Like, it's all kinds of animals out there that we have begun to genetically modify or breed to try and meet our egoic needs more. So,
Yeah, there's layers in this. So there's a breed of cat that I didn't even know about until 4 or 5 years ago, and I was horrified. I was absolutely horrified when I found out about it. And a lot of people like them. I'm not even going to name the breed, but they were specifically bred from a highly intelligent breed of feline mixed with a very docile breed of feline that's also overbred, that has very specific genetic physiological things that create problems. And they've bred them together to create an animal that's very docile but intelligent, but also has a lot of physiological problems. And the what made me so uncomfortable about this is knowing that the person that I know that went and bought one, like found a breeder that bred them, wanted this particular breed of cat, spent a ridiculous amount of money on this cat, and from day one spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, made herself almost bankrupt to take care of an animal that was suffering. Like, when
right,
I met this animal companion, she was like, "Come over, meet my animal companion." Like, well, she said pet, but you know what I mean.
right.
And, "Oh, he's beautiful and you're going to love him and he's great." And she, it, he was so miserable. And he kept telling me, "I just want her to understand that the status quo of what she thinks she's proving to the world, that she has this very expensive cat that gives her this ego boost, basically.
Hmm.
I'm never going to be able to give her that. I'm going to give her the opposite of that because that's her lesson." And it was so horrifying for me to watch
Right.
this animal companion completely aware that he went through suffering to teach her that. And she still didn't really get it. I mean, she's gotten it better, but at the time it was not a good thing.
Yeah.
And there's a quality of things that we've done with breeding animal companions in certain breeds, right? Like, um, small ear, nose canals, that squished face, the inability to clean themselves. Like, our animal companions in their natural state in nature, they can take care of
They
themselves,
can
right?
be completely sufficient. They have the
When
wisdom.
Right, but when their bodies have been manipulated so much to fulfill a human need
Right.
of ego or beauty standard or possession, or it's I've worked with people who have had canine companions that are bred specifically for protection, but then those breeds are then abused and manipulated and gone against their nature to attack and hurt because they're hurt, right? Like
Right.
hurt people, hurt animals, and
Yeah.
hurt all of us, right? Because we're all
Right.
animals, like you said.
Yeah.
If you want to use animal as that kind of word, we are all entities living in meat suits. Is kind of how I look at it.
We are all living
And
in bodies that can move around independently, and yeah.
right, and there's things that we've done from a human ego societal status perspective that I think felines are kind of ironically some of the ones that I get a giggle out of. Like that particular breed that I was talking about is the only one of a couple that I know of that have been bred so much that their natural felineness is less connected to them,
Mm.
right? But if you look at some of the other mixes, right? Like if you let them loose, like say if something tragic happens and a family leaves them behind, they may be traumatized, but they can survive, right? Like they can hunt, they can survive as long as they have their claws, even if they don't have their claws, some of them figure it out. Like they're connected more to their naturalness, their natural environment. But we've manipulated some of the breeds so much that they can't. If you let a Persian, if you let a Persian out, in a couple years, they're so matted that it stretches their skin and it can create huge infections on their skin, and they die not even because they can't hunt, but because the weight of their double coated fur is so heavy and so matted, it kills them.
Yeah.
Like there's things we've done through genetic manipulation of our animal companions that is all done from a human ego perspective, and it's awful. It's
Yeah.
absolutely awful.
I concur.
It's a soapbox I will never step down from.
No, I mean it's my same soapbox. I very much am connected to my druid roots, and in druidry we see every being as sacred, and every
Yes.
animal is sharing wisdom, including humans. Humans have
Mm-hmm.
wisdom to share too. Like we are all
Yes.
equal players in this
Yes.
adventure, and it boggles my mind that so many people do have a hierarchy. Like even and I'm not going to get into like whether you choose to be vegetarian or not, because
Right.
there
That's
are
a whole
people that
separate
need
thing.
to eat meat, and I respect that. But to have a cognitive, it is okay for me to eat cows, but it is not okay that other people eat dogs and cats.
Right.
Why? What
Right.
makes the dog and a cat more superior to a cow? And then there are cultures
Exactly.
that see cows as sacred. Like we're
Right.
all living beings. So it's just this, if we are willing to see any creature before us, any entity before us for who and what they are, without playing at hierarchies, we would be in a very different place, and we'd have a lot more respect. Even those of us
Yes.
who need to eat or choose to eat meat, right? We could have a different
Right.
respect for the entity that we are consuming. And so it's like, we just need to see our impact in how we are interconnected with this full web of beings. So I'm curious to kind of leap over to sort of the seeding stuff, because we like to get woo up in here. Is Astra doing something fun over there?
You said, it's how you said it. She looked up. She's been kind of like looking out the window, but she looked right at me in the eye and went, it was funny. Like, aha.
Oh,
She
oh,
knew where you were going before I knew where you were going. That was funny.
Excellent. So we like to get woo in here. You know, we're all about this inner tapestry and the energy that makes up everything. And
Yep.
I am so curious to get more into star-seeded animals.
Yeah.
So you already mentioned that Dulcie was not a cat in a cat body, right? We
No.
have humans that are not humans in human bodies. They're other things in human bodies, sort of
Yep.
me. We
Yep.
have
Oh yeah.
all. I'm a hobbit, mer, unicorn. Who knows what I am at this point? But you know, we have all these entities that float through the cosmos and leap into different bodies at different times to have different experiences. And you had shared with me back when I originally got my blueprint done, you were like, oh, yeah. And, you know, these animals come from here and were seeded from here. And you were sharing all of this with me. And I was just, my mind was like, you know, so expanded. And that was over a year ago now. And it's finally all absorbed and we're good to go. So I would love to talk about that. Like, what you know, we have star-seeded humans, we have star-seeded animals, we have all of these different entities. Why do we have star-seeded animal entities, and why did they choose to come here? I'm curious if you have a perspective on that.
You know, I ask why all the time. I
Why did I choose to come here, Red? Like, this is a
I ask that
dumpster
question
fire.
all the time. Oh yeah, I'm with you. You know, so far, I think that the most consistent answer I get is that there's something about how Earth herself, as she is growing in her own process of her own entity self, as she's dimensionally growing. I don't know have a better word for it really, but that many of these entities that are coming through, human or in animal form, right? The different forms in our world, right? That there's something unique that's happening here that even I don't understand. And I don't pretend to really understand it. I can only go by what I've been told. And Dulcie was an example of an entity that she was apparently attempting to find me. Um, she came through to be one of my teachers. And I didn't know that. And I was completely oblivious. And it took my own journey to help us connect and come together. And I have this beautiful story to go with it now because of that, right?
Mhm.
But animal companions can be contracted just like human people can be contracted with other human people in their blueprint. Um, and sometimes they are just doing their own thing, right? It's a web. It's a connection. It's patterning that's so big that I can't say I really understand it. I get glimpses. So every once in a while, an animal companion of somebody else's will tell me something. I'm like, oh, is that for me? Is that for them? Right? Like um, you know, Astra is in our lives because she's here for my partner. Like she's here for my
Mm.
husband. Like that's her person.
Yeah.
And I joke about it. I say she tolerates me because there is a certain quality of when I am doing something that she's like, oh yeah, you're doing your own thing. I don't need to pay attention to that. I cease to exist to her. Like she just ignores that I'm even in the room, even in the space, because her person is struggling with something. Her person, her contracted person. I know that Astra has a contract with my husband. And I know that. I recognize it. I acknowledge it. And I don't push past that.
Yeah.
And occasionally she lets me know, like when we sat down and she was like looking at me when you had said something, I was like, oh, I need to say that to Safrianna because it's something that she's validating, not because she has to. She's making a choice
Yeah.
to participate, but she doesn't have to. Because I've watched her completely like, I'm not here for you. You deal with your shit. I'm going to go work with him. Right.
Right.
And she's never shared with me specifically what that contract is with my husband, because it's apparently none of my business. I have gotten nosy and I have asked, and she's basically told me to screw off. So, I mean, and I respect it, and I don't push. Um, I've been very blessed to have some amazing animal companions that were here for me, right? And that's okay. I'm not always going to have one. And so there's a quality of the entity itself can be from anywhere. And why they come through and how they come through, I really think that it has to do with contracts. Do I understand all the things there is to know about contracts? No. I'm pretty sure my puny little human brain would just explode like a pimple if I tried.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I have no ego attachment to feeling like I need to know it all. It's not my, I got other shit to work out too, right? But there are different kinds of entities, and some entities are very much specifically from where they come from originally. They're star-seeded, and we can get into that in a minute, so don't let me forget that. And then there are entities that are from here. Like, they're entities that are from Earth herself. They're from this plane of multidimensional awareness self, and they come through very differently. And so far, this is a true statement. So if I ever encounter it differently, I will let you know. But so far, I have never encountered a star-seeded entity in a natural entity form from here. Whatever that means.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm understanding that. You have yet to meet a star-seeded entity living in an animal body that is otherwise from here, that has never
Correct.
been elsewhere. Because I know you and
Never
I've
been
talked
anywhere
about, like, whales, for example, are
Yes.
star-seeded from the water planet.
Yes. Yes.
So a whale absolutely could be a star-seeded. It is a star-seeded entity. It may now be just a whale here, but it could also
be. I haven't met one yet that's just a whale from here, just FYI.
Okay, that's fair.
I've had some weird encounters with them, so far that has not proved to be a true statement. But
so I'm curious.
Yeah,
I mean, you and I have talked always, like, anytime we get into absolutes, we have just guaranteed that there is a case where it is not now, right? Like, or it is in the case of not. So there really are no complete absolutes. But yes, so we've talked about canine and feline energy are actually from elsewhere originally. Whales.
Yep.
Certain birds.
Certain birds.
But
not all birds.
Birds are like, there's a lot going on with birds. That's what I will say for right now.
Well, so the best thing I know how to explain it. So I know for a fact that eagles are not from here. So far, crows are from here, ravens are from here, most of your parrots are from here. So far, all of them that I know of. I say most because I just haven't encountered all of them, apparently, obviously, right? But there's a lot of birds that are from here that are raptors, but not all raptors. Eagles are a very big one that they're not from here. But condors are from here.
Yeah, I know. I have a great condor cousin spirit that is one of my guide adjacent. They are a helper of sorts. I won't. I know you're still coming up with the perfect language for that, but they're on my team. Yeah, so condors are of here. Elephants, then, I think you had mentioned, are from here as well.
Elephants are from here. And it's very interesting. Like, when you meet an entity that's from here in an animal body, out in the wild or out in the world somewhere, they sound different than those that are star-seeded. Like, there's a very distinct, it's like an accent. So it's interesting. There's a lady that I met once, and she has animal speak, and she kept saying that the accents are different, and I wasn't sure what she was talking about for sure. And then she was talking about her horses, and horses are not from here. They are not from here. And she was talking about her horses and her dogs and her cats, and she was talking about some of the animal speak stuff that she was doing with clients. And she kept talking about accents, and I didn't quite understand what she meant until she mentioned that she had had a conversation with a giraffe at a zoo. And I went, please explain to me more what you're talking about. And she kept talking about how she had to hear differently. And I realized what she was saying from her perspective, from her animal speak, is that the giraffe's accent was so different than all of the star-seeded accents that she was used to listening to.
Mm.
And she said that it was almost easier to understand, but harder to translate.
Hmm.
And I thought that is a really good way of saying it. If you're from here with animal speak, that accent's way easier to understand than when you start listening to your star-seeded accent or where they're from. There's a translation process through the meat suit experience, I guess, from a star-seeded entity versus an entity that's in a body that's just always been in an earth-based body.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. So there's so much nuance in this. And then, because we like to talk about gifts here
Yeah.
and blueprint stuff. So there is
Mm-hmm.
the gift of animal speak, and
Yep.
that still comes through for different people in different ways how they hear or receive the messages.
Yeah.
I some of my animal speak buddies, like, they'll see a whole persona around the animal, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
this animal got a little top hat and a monocle on because that's their personality, and
Yeah.
they want to be perceived in certain ways, and people with
They
animal speak
do.
may be able to pick up on that.
Oh
So
yeah.
there's animal speak, and then what are some of the other animal related gifts that people can have?
So people or animals?
What are the gifts people can have when working
Ah,
with
okay.
animal entities?
Okay. Um, well, there's a variety of them. So animal speak is pretty straightforward communication with animal entities, animal companions, no matter what. Animal speak can often kind of bridge into plant speak, or what I fondly called the green thumb, but it's more than that. It's so much more than that. But the reason I mention that is because sometimes the animal companion gifts can come with healing property connections with the plant speak so that they can go deeper into the healing aspects for the animal companions to know what healing foods, healing plants, other like natural connectors for that meat suit of the animal that is the entity that's in that animal body. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are also energetic reconnector gifts. So it's almost like you can read the energy lines that connect the animal body into Earth's body. That's a gift. There is the gift of kind of like a hands-on healing thing that's just for animal bodies. It it can work across star seeds, um, but I have noticed that I have met a couple people that they have that type of hands-on healing, but it only works with star bodies and it doesn't work with earth-based bodies. So I
Mm.
don't really understand like why is it that way, and I don't know if it's the entity that's in the human meat suit that's the problem, or like I haven't quite figured out like why it doesn't cross and why it's so specific. One of the other things that I have noticed is that in some of the gifts that a human may have, like a walking, talking human body, is that they may resonate to star seeds that are closer to their own entity body, their natural entity body. So that's where we start making silly phrases like I'm a cat person or I'm a dog person or I'm a horse person, like that.
Well,
That's
me
not
being a cat
really,
person doesn't make any sense in this case, but it is what it
yeah,
is.
like there's statements that get made because there may be actually start entity recognition there. Like there's layers of that I try really hard to kind of not fall into those buckets. Um, the other cool gift that I have seen a couple times fairly recently, I didn't used to see it all the time. I'd see it every once in a while, but I've seen it a couple times now where a person's like gift is the ability to translate the entity within the star-seeded body. So that's where you get the monocles. That's where you get the top hat. That's where you get these imageries that people have as a gift, where they can see the presentation of the entity within that wants to share that with you. Um, it's a type of animal speak, I think, but I'm not real sure. I think it just translates a little differently. But like you said, they're very image driven, and I found a couple people that actually feel the need to draw it out. It's
Hmm.
very anthropomorphic, I find, interestingly,
Yeah.
but there is a form of communication that comes with it. There's always a layering and messaging. I don't really understand it really. I've noticed it.
Hmm.
Um, what's the other one? There's one where so I've seen it a couple times. It's where the connection with the animal entity is for animal, the entity within that's trapped in the animal body that has karma. So there's a gift, and it's very, I haven't seen it very much, but someone who has this gift can recognize that the entity within the animal body is actually trapped in that type of animal body, or is going from animal body to animal body because they're trapped in karma, but
Hmm.
they're trapped in karma in such a way they can't come back into a human form or into a regular meat suit form because they're not from here. And the trauma was so severe that they got trapped in a mid like an intermediary star-seeded body. They couldn't come back to a human form. So
Hmm.
they behave like they're humans because they're so trapped in an animal body. They behave like they're karmically trapped humans, but they are clearly animals. And unless you have that gift, you don't recognize that's what's going on. So that is a gift. That is somebody who, in a human form, has that gift to recognize that's a trapped karmic entity. That's an entity trapped in karma in an animal body. And that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
So it's very specific. It's very unique. I have seen it. It's amazing. Um, and people who have that gift, they make the rest of us look like we're dummies in comparison sometimes. I mean, they really do, because their awareness of that is so strong. And
Yeah.
they're driven by that usually. So far when I've seen that, there's a blueprint driven to retrieve these karmically trapped souls in these animal bodies.
Yeah.
Because they'll recognize it in anything that's star-seeded. Anything. Because so far, karmically trapped entities are always in star-seeded bodies. Again,
Hmm.
so far, I've never met an animal that's an animal from here that's got karma. Ever.
I mean, that even it's so interesting. Like I said, I've studied druidry. I consider myself a druid. I literally was introduced to druidry out of a dream state
Yep.
when I was like 18. Um, and then when I was 19, I started to really study it. And in druidry, there's this principle of, and I've realized now that everything that's written about druidry is earth based. It is
Yes.
100%
All of it.
earth based. All of
All
the
of it.
reincarnation stuff is earth based, and so it always
Yep.
felt a little off to me until I'm like, oh, this isn't taking into account star seeds and star seeded bodies and
Yes.
entities and what. Oh, okay, this makes sense. But there was this
Yep.
idea of single celled life form, and then coming into plant form, and then coming into animal form, and then coming into a human, can do more things form, and then eventually ascending beyond a human form.
Right.
And that makes sense if animals here on earth are only like they're from here and they're currently still in an animal form. They're not sort of incarnating up into other, they have an accrued karma, because animals, when they're just being animals, don't do the karma thing. They are literally operating under instinct, under nature, under their earth
Mhm.
sense. That's something you
Yep,
shared with me, that all animals have that earth sense. So they're just
all
like
of them.
doing their thing, they're feeling the flow. Like there's no karma in that. It's just living. It's just like breathing and being a being here. So that totally makes sense to me. I appreciate that. That has dropped in and made a whole lot more sense today about earth animals and the lack of karma. So,
Yeah.
uh, and that gift, these nuanced gifts are so interesting to me, because I have animal speak, and I have the ability to recognize star-seeded entities in animal bodies. Um, One of the animals that recently came into our life is definitely a poor little star-seeded boy, and he came into a little dog body, and he is so traumatized. Poor little buddy did not know what he was getting himself into. And so like that's an experiment for our family to like help him figure out how to heal from this. But people are not aware of the depth of energy, and again, this interconnected web. I just keep going back to that today, of all of reality, of the multidimensional aspects of life. And so many of us are just getting pets and then we have no idea what we're really signing up for, right? And so that goes back to contracts and
Yeah. It's always an interesting conversation. The human trauma experience, I've worked with people over the years. I experienced it as a child, somebody who acquired pets, like a hoarding situation. It was
mhm,
awful. It was, I love animals so much. I want them. Animals love me, except no animal likes them at all because they were so trauma driven. All the starseeded entities were like, please, I don't want anything to do with you. You can't even recognize your own trauma. Um, and then the ones that were like contracted to them, that they were like, well, I don't like this animal, right? Like the human ego trauma trap is awful. And when I look at gifts and I look at animal gifts, one of the things that pops up pretty consistently, and I just assumed all of them were like this until I got a little bit older, which is dogs are very empathic. That seems to be their baseline. Cats are energy sensitive. That's their baseline. It doesn't mean that dogs and cats can't have both. Horses are both. They have both. They're like empathic and energy sensitive all wrapped in one big package. I've never met a horse that wasn't both. Like each body itself also, the star-seeded bodies seem to either have these baselines or not, but all of them have earth sense.
mhm,
All of them. And I know that there are people out in the world that don't have access to earth sense. I know that because I've met them, I've had them in sessions. It's a real thing. You can go your whole life and not understand that concept.
mhm,
That's okay. But our animal companions all have that. And it's important that we recognize that we're not acquiring pets. We don't go out and say, well, I want a turtle, or I want a snake, or I want to collect spiders, or I want 17 different kinds of cats, or I want to breed this particular kind of cat because I want to make money. Like those motivations are part of the sickness that we
right.
display in insisting on the separation between our lived experience and Earth herself and her consciousness and all of the
Mhm.
connections we make. And I love how you go back to the Druidry all the time because it is a real. I've used so many words over the years. I've studied so many pantheons and so many theosophies in the world that I very rarely stick to any of them because there is so much truth in the baseline of most of them. And most
Mhm.
of them all go back to the baseline that we are all connected.
Yep.
And our animal companions, like I remember listening to my granddad, and he's like, cats belong outside. They're supposed to be outside hunting mice and stuff. And that's a true statement. Like that's what they do in their wild. They eat mice and rabbits and moles and snakes, and they do
And the
their thing.
birds, one of the
And the
outdoor
birds,
cats here just ate a bird outside. We were like,
right?
there's feathers everywhere.
Right. But then you look at in our modern society, when we look at how dogs behave, right? If you have a whole bunch of dogs that don't have homes, they pack together and they become very dangerous, right? They can become dangerous packs where they're attacking people for food, and they can drag small children away. I mean, some countries, like, they have wild roaming packs of dogs that they have a really hard time controlling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and same with cats, right? Like, cats are very looked at as not pack animals. I will argue that all day long that they are. But when every single house on the street has a cat and they're letting them out, all the bird population drops in the area.
Yep.
Because what are they going to do? They're going to do their best to behave in connection with their environment,
Yep.
how they know how. So there's a I hate to use the word moral ethical code, but there is kind of this undercurrent of modern society refusing to discuss the interconnectedness of the nature of the animal versus what we think we want to honor the animal in our home, the animal companion in our home, and the nature of the animal. So I have had long drawn kicking and screaming arguments with people where, well, I want a cat, but I have to let my cat out because he just wants out. I'm like, of course he wants out because that's his nature. But if you let him out, he's going to kill all the birds. And we already have bird population issues because our dumbass society keeps spraying pesticides everywhere, which kill the bugs, which then kill the birds, which then eventually poison our cats because our cats are outside eating them, and then they have liver function problems and they die from the poisons from the birds. Like, I don't understand why you don't understand.
Yeah.
I do not understand why you don't understand.
I don't either. Like, and that's the whole, I very rarely talk about this, but I feel like throwing this in there today. I am not anti-hunting because we have screwed up our animal population so much. We've killed off all the predators that we have an influx of deer. We have an overabundance of deer. We also have an overabundance of wild cats that are
Yes,
roaming
we do.
around.
They're everywhere.
We've wrecked the ecosystem that was natural and already existed.
Mhm.
So now humans do have to intervene, unfortunately, to try and get back to balance because we intervened in all of the wrong ways in the first place and screwed it all up. So it's like we're in very much an in-between place right now. And again, like, animals completely left to their own devices would have done their own thing, and it would have naturally balanced because of that deep interconnectedness with the earth.
Mhm.
But we have disrupted that as a species so much by this superiority, by it's my job to control everything and to be the
Yeah.
top dog, right? Like,
Right. Right.
to
Well, I mean, they've learned that from reintroducing wolves into Yellowstone. Like, they've reintroduced them to the point now where they're seeing ecological balance happening with deer populations, bird populations, small predator or small, not predator, but like mink and grouse and some of the smaller animals. Like,
Mhm.
and they only know that because they reintroduced wolves and they've done these huge studies and went, oh, wait, that's affecting like trees. It's affecting grass. It's affecting minks. It's affecting moles. It's affecting, oh, gee, it's affecting the entire deer population. Why is that? Oh, it's affecting the grizzly population. We didn't know it would do that, right? Like, the interconnectedness, humans looking at everything in a myopic, hierarchical, ego-based space, we're going to go back to that, right?
Mhm.
Is a skewed perspective of how everything is not what you think it is.
Right.
You know, there's this wonderful story that I don't remember all of it, and I wish I did, but it's a Native American story which tells the story about how the tribes in the California forests were managing the forest through controlled burns and through collecting firewood and collecting things, and how they managed the forest for generations, but in a way that was connected. Like, we think of Native Americans, indigenous to the United States, as, well, they just wandered around and they just went with the seasons type thing, and this optic of spiritual hierarchical way without recognizing that tribal knowledge was also forestry. It was also managing wildlife. It was also being connected in a natural way so that your resources were to be there for 7 generations or more.
Right.
And our modern society has broken that so bad
So bad.
that I'm not against hunting either. Now, I'm also going back to the whole like meat thing, which I'm going to go back to how I've had to have guides tell me how to talk to people about that. Like, your meat suit is nutritionally deficient because you're not getting something you need. So how do you get back to being on track means, yes, there is a viable entity within you that comes from the stars that recognizes the sentience in all things. Of course you're going to have trouble eating anything that has sentience. You do know that the lettuce you're eating also has sentience.
You're correct.
Good to know that you know that, right? But how do you get to a point where you can sustain your meat suit and honor where that nutrition comes from?
Right.
And the part that I get absolutely tickled from is that we have the tools. It's just been codified and put in these culty religious contexts that make you nauseous, right? But if you look at honoring where your food comes from, that's the kind of prayer, if you want to use that word, right? Like, where's the reciprocity of recognition between where your food comes from and Mother Earth herself, back to the interconnected web? And how do you nurture and feed yourself and also feel like you're in balance with your animal companions that are in your life? I know somebody who killed her cat by accident because she wanted to make her cat a vegetarian. I'm like, you do know that they are carnivores,
I can't do that.
right? And she was horrified when she discovered when her cat died. Her vet like reamed her a new one because he was
I
like,
bet.
"You killed your cat. You killed your cat." She was depressed for like 6 months. She's like, "Oh, I can't believe I did that. He had to be wrong." I'm like, "No, they're carnivores. They eat meat.
Yeah, Miss Baby
Their
goes
bodies
crazy for
have to have meat."
gravy. She loves her little meat smoothies. That's what we call them. And I'm like, this is so gross and I don't want to do this for you, but it's dolphin safe. It is the most sustainable and like humane I can. And I know you love it, little girl. So here you go. Right? Like
Yeah,
we have to honor the needs of other beings, period.
yeah,
And
we have to.
there is this moral and ethical thing because it goes back to go back to a term from Druidry, Nuevra, life force energy, right? And if
Yeah.
you kill an animal to consume and that animal has lived a miserable life and had no humane experiences, what are you really consuming? Versus an animal that is raised on a small farm and loved and given a very good
Hmm.
life and helps with the land and is in communion, and then the time comes and you humanely let the animal go and you consume the meat. Like there's a very different line there, end of spectrum there. And I am for the nuance, right? Even if I make that choice for myself that I'm just
Hmm.
not going to consume it because I have done the research to be able to not do it. Like if I were to do it, I would only do it in that way of that life
Right.
force energy being honored because I've had that
Hmm.
awareness, right? It's not always been there, but now I have that awareness. And that's the part that I want to bring to people is like respect the
Hmm.
entities, right? Whether
Yes.
they are your companion, whether you are eating them, whether you are raising them to help in your yard, whatever you are
Oh
doing, like
yeah.
honor them, respect them, and
Hmm.
give each other, let's give each other the best qualities of life that we can because we can. We
Because we can.
can.
We can. And that excuse that we can't is probably the part that I will admit that chaps my ass and I'll get a little hot under the collar. Like, the inequity that we continue to feed from that ego of hierarchy doesn't hold water with me. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're vegetarian, but then you're going to everything in your life is going to be vegan leather, which by the way is plastic most of the time, right? And you're going to contribute to continuing the plastic cycle that is destroying our earth, but yet you insist on being vegetarian. Please explain to me how that balances. Please explain that to me,
Right.
because it doesn't. It
Right.
does not balance. It's a choice of hierarchical need that you are choosing to do. And to get back to the animal companion part, I would challenge people that get into that inequity. They find animal companions that are trying to show them that. Those animal companions are probably trying to show them that all of the time, because that goes into our contracts. Like, how do you get out of that karmic loop and connect back in and find the equity of reciprocity between you and the animal companion in your life and in your world. And I know we went really big, but I want to come back into the tiny things. And I really want to look at, like, when you have an animal companion, they are your companion.
Mm-hmm.
And if they choose not to be your companion, they will let you know. You can't hold on to an animal companion that doesn't want to be held on to. They will find a way out, because they do have that reciprocity and equitable ethical connection with the environment and Mother Earth herself. And if you're not honoring the connection that they're here to show you, they will go somewhere else. You cannot prevent that.
Yeah. And so
It's just
that
the way it
brings me
works.
to, yeah, that brings me to a question I want to make sure we got to today, which is, how do we connect more with our animal companions and like really honor them? You know, of course I have ideas, but I'm super curious to hear yours, especially with the frame of people have different gifts and different
Yeah,
abilities. So what are some
yeah.
general ways people can connect, and what are some ways they can try to go a little bit deeper? What comes up for you there?
Well, like we've talked about before. So if anybody wants to understand a little bit more about energy sensitivity, empathy, please go back and watch some of our other podcasts, because there's some tidbits in there that will help you understand them. But one of the biggest things is pay attention, be in your body, even when your body's uncomfortable, even when you go to an emotional place that doesn't feel good, or an energetic place that feels very noisy. Pay attention to that when you're in a space with an animal companion, because whether you have animals speak or not, they are communicating with you in a way that you can receive if you let your ego go. And that's a big thing. So I love my partner. He's absolutely amazing. But Astra is here for him, right? So I know that. And every time Astra does something that he's like, oh, she loves you too, Red. She loves you too. Like, he's wanting to share that contract, because this is just my husband. Like, he
Yeah.
just wants to share everything. It's beautiful. And I'm like, well, yes, she is communicating with me. I'm going to honor that. And yes, like, my throat hurts, or I don't feel good today. And she's sitting on my lap because she's a natural number 4 cat. So she's going to do that. So there's that. But because that's in her nature, right? But she is also empathic, and my husband's empathic. So she will pick up the layer of emotion, and then she will respond to that because she has that gift. I don't have empathy. I don't understand that. It's a language I am not familiar with, but I can recognize that I honor her as herself. So she honors me in return. If I did not acknowledge that contract between those two, like, when she came to our house, it was really how we found her was very, like, I wasn't sure we should take this animal home. Like, I'm not sure, because it didn't feel like there was a connection. So I didn't understand why my husband was like, she's coming home with us. And I'm like, did she choose us? He goes, yes, she chose us. And I went, but I
Not so
didn't
much
feel
to us.
that. Right? Right? And I thought, it took me a couple weeks of her being in our home with me paying attention, watching her body language. Like, animal companions, all animals, pick an animal, I don't care what they are, they have a language in their body that they speak through. And it can be very subtle. It can be very easy to miss the little pieces. And she'd been with us about 2 weeks, and something, I don't remember exactly what it was, but she's not interested in going outside. I think that was actually kind of part of it. But Luke came home and she was like greeting him at the door and just effusive and being very affectionate. And I had come home earlier than him that day, and she didn't greet me at all. She was like, "Who the fuck are you?" Like she looked at me and went, "Mm-mm," and walked
Not
away.
interested.
I mean, literally turned around and walked off. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it was how she greeted him and how he leaned down, and there was this, like, I could sense from an energetic perspective, this, there goes it was like I watched the contract acceptance in that moment, and she was happy. Like, for the first time being in her home, she was truly happy. I watched her happiness emerge. I can't feel that emotion, but I could see the happiness. And I realized those two have a contract. Huh. Am I mad about that? No, I'm not mad about that. I think it's kind of cool. And now I get to it. And of course, then my curiosity kicks in. Now I get to observe. Well, what does that mean? How do I live in a space with my partner, who we shared a contract with another animal companion a couple of years ago? And how does that shift? How does that shift in our dynamic? And it's a fascinating thing to watch Luke he tries to share the contract. It's so funny. He's like, but look, she loves you too. But look, she wants to sit in your lap. But look, she's telling you this thing. Like, he's trying to share. And it's a beautiful thing to watch him heal, because she's there. She is here to help him heal in a different way that I can't help him with.
Right.
And how we learn to communicate with our animal companions means we have to let our ego go. I had to look at that and go, okay, I recognize there's something different happening. I recognize she's not here for me, and she did not pick us. So I don't know what's going on, and why is this one coming home with? I'm not going to say no, but I just don't understand, right? Like, how do I let her tell me through her behaviors, through her actions, through her rejection, right? Like, oh, that's a human trigger. Like, oh, you rejected me. Oh, what did I do? Like, I had to go through all of that, just like we all do. And be okay with it, and be completely okay with, she's not doing it from, I don't like you. There's no hate, there's no fear, there's no castigation, there's no whatever words you want to use for that. She's trying to communicate with me to show me what she really is here for. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that connection, I was able to lean into the other things that she's been showing me. So, like, earlier today when we first got on the call, and you said something, I don't remember what it is now, but she turned around and looked at me, and I was giggling because she could hear through my headphones what you had said. And she did that slow number 4 eye blink to say, there you go, that's something that's important. She was communicating to reinforce, to validate in my own human experience that, yes, this is important. Yes, we need to talk about this. Yes. And maybe the message isn't even for me, because I knew when she heard your voice, she was responding to you. She wasn't even responding to me. So when our animal companions communicate with us, we have to let go of what we think it is. Is it attached to me? Is it for someone else? We pay attention to the ear twitches, to the tail wags, to how they touch us, how they sit with us, how they communicate. Like, when I was learning natural numbers for the very first time, and I was watching her, I realized that every time I started talking about natural numbers, she'd lay down on her back, and her bottom abdomen, she would spread her bottom abdomen open and show me her 4. And we had noticed at the very beginning when we got her, she didn't have a murder button. All cats have a murder button, right? She doesn't have one. Well, she does have one if you rub her above her natural number 4.
That's our 2. If you rub the 2 below his 2, he gets mad. If you go to his 4, he's like, no, stop.
But if you go up, right? So she was telling me from the very beginning, hey, I'm a 4. Yeah, I'm a little thick. I'm human. It took me a minute to get it. But once I got it, it was like, oh, animals do have natural numbers.
Mhm.
Oh, there's a truth with a capital T, right?
Yep.
So that's how we learn to communicate with our animal companions. To we have to step out of the anthropomorphization, if I said that word right. Um, we have to step out of that and into letting them teach us how they communicate.
Yeah.
And that requires practice, and it requires us being okay failing, screwing up, because they're very patient. They have no,
They are.
I mean, I have met some that are a little impatient, but that's usually because they've been trying for a while and we're kind of thick.
Yeah. They give us some good grace. But, in
They
all
do.
of this, what I'm hearing is like ultimately to just again respect the entity in front of us. And there's
Yeah.
lessons here we can learn about how to treat each other and listen to each other because we don't all
Yeah.
speak the same language. We don't.
No.
Right. And that's part of that wisdom of natural numbers. It's part of the wisdom of knowing we all have a unique blueprint, that we have different gifts, that some of us are empathic and some of us are energy sensitive, like all of this stuff. I think it's just cool that we get to have these animal friends that take on different forms and speak in different languages and have so much to teach and offer us if we can really get out of our own human way and see them for who they are. So
Yeah.
it really is just like just connect and allow them to teach us because they can, regardless.
We have to slow down. We really have to slow down. Having a natural number 4 cat definitely reinforces that.
Yeah. Having the 8 cat in my life really reinforces the boundaries and the respecting of body integrity. And the 7 cat really helps me
Oh,
understand uh, the possibility of all of the danger in the world, and we're working on that. And the 2, oh my gosh, he's such a 2. He'll put his little paw out. He's just got to touch you. He's got to like, hey, we're connected. I just want you to
oh,
know we're connected. He loves eye contact. He's the sweetest little boy. And then the 9, who is not a cat in a cat body, is something completely different. But his little 9 body is so a 9 communication, and we can tell because we know that about him. We've paid attention how to identify when he's off flying through the astral with the other dragons and bringing back information we need to hear. And then he'll come over and he'll make this deep 9 eye contact with me where we both look
mm-hmm.
completely blank, and we'll have a whole conversation and everybody else is like, what are they doing right now? And then I'm like, oh, Quasi told me this.
Yes,
They all
yes,
speak different languages, though. Every
they
single
do.
feline companion I have, they're totally speaking a different language, just like humans do. So,
Just like humans do. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
is there anything else that you would like to share today? Because I feel like I'm feeling like this buzzy wow, like so full of just love for the animal kingdom and
Hmm.
earth and all of it. But yeah,
I think the big thing is leaning into allowing each animal companion to communicate how they need to, and really, really, really stop and pause and make sure you're not going into that anthropomorphization thing where you're relating it to the same motivations that you have, because animals don't have the same motivations you have. They really don't. And there is nature, there is instinct, there's connection in different ways. And just because the cat wants to go outside, I mean, Astra will sit at the screen door for hours and talk to the birds. If I open the screen door, she might intend to go outside, but she really doesn't want to go outside because her body says it's not safe. So
right.
she'll run away. She also knows that she's not here to be out there.
Yeah.
And if she got abandoned, yeah, she could probably survive, but that's not what she's here to do. And she knows that. So we just have to pay attention to different things. And oh, let me rephrase that. Pay attention to all the things, but try not to anthropomorphize. Try not to put your own human motivations behind things. One of the things
Yeah.
I've learned from our animal companion, all the ones that I've encountered, is that what people think their motivations are, if you think they're human motivated, you're probably wrong.
Probably.
So
Yeah.
far.
Yeah. That tracks. And they can still help us
Oh
uncouple
yeah.
from egoic stuff that we're doing with other humans too.
Yes.
That is the beauty of the contracts and the relationships, is
Oh yeah.
they can help us navigate it. If
Oh
we
yeah.
don't then just put all of our shit on them and end up making
Yeah.
them feel terrible, right?
Yeah.
Which we can
Yeah.
do by projecting our stuff at them. I always say, like, our animal companions are still like little toddlers, right?
They are.
They do feel what we're putting at them, and they do understand, maybe not to the they don't understand all the nuances of English, but they sure understand our energy and emotion that we're pouring out. So it's something
Yeah.
for us to be mindful of as we connect with them, because they're here for us when we need to bawl our eyes out or be mad, right?
Mhm.
They can hold space for
Yeah.
that if it's not.
They can. And we should put a pin in that, because that is next conversation. What do they do with that energy? You might want to write that down. We need to talk about that, because that's a thing. I knew we were going to find the next one at the very end of this one. I knew it.
All right, I'm making the note now. So
I knew it.
if you have follow-up questions from this topic, though, because I'm sure we'll be coming back and diving in even more, we will be back in about 2 weeks and seemingly resuming our prior schedule pre-sabbatical. So yes, let us know if there are topics you want us to cover. If you have questions following up from this, star-seeded animal entities, animals in general, the animal gifts, and then what do animals do with our energy when we put it out there? Well, we'll get into that next time, it sounds like. But for now, we'll wrap it up there. I know this is a lot to take in, and thank you, Red, as always, for having the conversation. And
Absolutely.
our audience was very quiet today, but they were listening because we had a lot of people come in and watch. So
Yep.
if you've got those questions and you don't want to seem weird for asking them publicly, we are here to take them in
Yeah,
privately, and we'll keep your
absolutely.
questions anonymous. Again, I know we are the wild, woo, and weird, and I'm here for that.
We are.
But not everybody's ready to wave that flag around. So
Okay.
reach
It's
out
okay.
privately. We've got you.
It's a safe space. You can always reach out privately.